Good evening, everyone. It is 6:32 p.m. and I'm calling today's Wednesday, April 15th, Law and Rules Committee meeting to order. We are going to start the meeting by going into an attorney-client session with our attorney, Barbara Dave Fuller, along with our litigation attorney, Tim Collins. So I'm ask that the public leave and we will be pausing the Zoom and coming back to it. Thank you. And invite Mayor Noble to stay or. Thank you. Alright, it is 7:20 PM. We're coming out of attorney-client session. First thing on the agenda is residency requirements for city workers with Mayor Noble. Come on up, please.
Well, thank you, everybody. As I had mentioned in my communication, the Common Council has been working really diligent to try to update the various parts of our code that are out of place. And as part of the charter, I'm sure there'll be many things that are identified. This is one area that, is really needing to be updated. So at least during my tenure, we've generally rewarded all of our employees following, the uniformed employees of the city, which indicates that under state civil service and local civil service law, generally you can be a uniformed officer of the city and work in one of the attached counties around your jurisdiction. And so, however, in our code, for all folks who are not that, so the non-uniform, which generally makes up all of CSEA and not all, but many confidential management employees, there is a 10-mile provision that has generally not been followed for at least the last 20 years from what we can tell. So we would like to update that to be able to change our local law that was done in the mid-1980s to be able to reflect how we treat the rest of our employees by saying that individuals just have to live within a county surrounding, our county. And so that is the request. I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Is there a specific reason why the timing for this now?
No, I think that we just, we realized that this was just something that was outdated and, looking through, when we're doing our recruitment and retention, we have employees that ask, do you have a residency requirement? You can easily Google it and find it in our code. And so people who are doing job searches often look and, whether it's someone who works in Saugerties or, down in New Paltz or, they have questions about how this all works. And civil service, processes them and hire them anyway. But I think it's important for us to kind of clarify the code for everybody's sake.
We, one of the only municipalities that have that, or for instance, like you just mentioned Saugerties, so Saugerties would have a provision that would not allow City of Kingston residents to work for them. So is it sort of reciprocal?
Yeah, I don't know of a lot of other municipalities that have like in-city codes where it's, that close to a community, like 10 miles. But it definitely, and one of the reasons why NICOM is trying to get it done at the state level is it totally exists. There are lots of communities across the entire state. I don't know about here in Ulster County, but in other places, they're definitely trying to change, some of the rules just to make it easier so that they don't have these same type of, recruitment issues. Because some towns, Kingston is a relatively robust community with a good amount of diversity, but there are some small towns and villages where it's impossible to find an engineer or a sewer technician or someone who has expertise in, being a municipal clerk. It is hard to find those positions in some of our small villages or towns that may have those residency requirements.
I'm sorry, Bruce. Is there any reason to limit it to Ulster County rather than a number of miles, like a wider range of miles? Because I'm just thinking, in Dutchess, it's a lot closer than some places in Ulster County.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not proposing just Ulster County, and I think that's why we're kind of proposing the surrounding counties around us, because someone can live in Rhinebeck and be closer to someone that lives in Ellenville, and so I think that's why we kind of are going with that, larger circle.
Michael?
So chapter 110 lists exceptions to this change in code, which is just get a waiver from the common council.
Yeah.
So why not just ask for our permission?
Well, I think that the issue comes from civil service in terms of, having to often choose from a list. And some lists, to be able to have an employee accept a position, on the contingency that the common council may or may not grant them their job, even after they followed kind of all of these steps, is just one more, I think, bureaucratic concern that people have about working for government is like, well, what if common council doesn't like me? And to be able to have to go through this process of going to a committee, then going to a full council meeting, to be able to get your position exempted for you to be able to work in the city, it will really hurt with our future recruitment, of our employees, I believe.
I mean, but just to push back on that, I actually don't really imagine a world deny a waiver because somebody lives in New Paltz.
No, I don't think there is, but I think that when we hire employees, many times we hire them and they give 2 weeks notice and then they start here. And so inserting a common council process that takes 2 months into that is not a realistic expectation of kind of been working for government. Because someone will be like, well, I can't start for 2 months after you offered me this job. That seems like an unrealistic expectation.
Sarah and then Bob.
So this would pertain to all employees at every level, right? This regulation, so even somebody who's being hired to work at a low level, the parks department or DPW would have to go through this.
Yes.
If we didn't make the change.
Right. Right now, we have just over 30 employees that currently do not qualify, under this provision that have been hired over the years out of 150 or so that I'm in CSEA and management.
And just one follow-up question, in terms of the surrounding counties, they don't have to be contiguous in terms of land, right? In other words, Dutchess County is across a river. So you're saying, so that would need to be explicit.
Yeah, and I think that's how, the law is written for police and firefighters. It's just a contiguous county and that includes Dutchess or Orange or Green and Sullivan.
Thank you.
I just want to support the mayor's position. I was involved in the recruitment for the Director of Public Works and for the city engineer. And in both cases, the candidate pool of local people is very, very shallow. And, we were able to find great candidates, but neither one of them would meet that criteria. I mean, Ed does now live in the city, but John, it was difficult to find people who were capable and willing to take the job. So I support this position.
I have a question, I haven't gone yet, so. So with the police and fire, is there a provision that someone that is local gets a higher weight on the list? Or,
So under civil service law, you have the ability, once a list is, a test is had and a list is certified, a municipality has the option of choosing a Kingston only list of Kingston residents to choose from, or the entire list. And because of the lack of recruitment for many positions in the city, it's probably been since 2017 that we pulled a Kingston only list. And once you pull a Kingston only list, you can only choose off of the Kingston list until it's kind of done, and then you can move on to the other list. And so, we just have not had enough Kingston only applicants for our competitive positions. You don't have to follow that at all for non-competitive positions, there are no lists and, but for the competitive positions where a test is given, which again, the state is moving away from the test. And so for the last couple of years, most of our positions have been under the New York HELPS program where you don't have to take a test. And so there's no, so that kind of, but either way, yes, that's kind of, there is an option for us to choose a Kingston only list if we so chose.
a list, but not say if it was a full list. We couldn't prioritize a Kingston person on a full list. Yeah, preference.
Correct. We had to separate the list and then choose off of one list or the other
Okay.
until one list is expired.
Michael?
So I am actually okay with us not the council not giving waivers to non-management employees, but I do absolutely think that we should be granting, that this should remain the case for department heads. I do think it's important for department heads to live in the city of Kingston or closely. I do think it's an invaluable part of your job to be here on Saturdays and Sundays to see how the city functions when city hall's not in service. So if we make it so just department heads apply to chapter 110, I would be fine with it, but I'm against changing the code for everybody. I think it's seeding an oversight that we shouldn't be seeding.
So I would imagine that part of the reason this was ever included was because you wanted people, similar to what Michael was referring to, but you also wanted people that lived in Kingston, spent their money in Kingston, contributed directly to the investment in Kingston and all of that. So while I understand that, fast forward in these more modern times, people are going online and they're doing job searches and, you want to be able to attract, a wider pool of people. So I get that. I'm kind of with Michael that for the more senior level positions, there should be a requirement, a residency requirement. But then I wonder if the person gets the job and they, live in Kingston, can they move?
It doesn't speak to that in the code. So there's nothing in the code saying they can't move. There's also nothing in the code saying that if someone does move, that they should be removed from their position.
Mhm.
And there's nothing saying that if someone is appointed by civil service through the official civil service process, that the code would require someone to also be removed. It doesn't speak to that either. And I think that the issue that I see now, right, and maybe this wasn't the case in the 1980s, but I think it is the case today, is that city government does not pay its employees enough to live in the city of Kingston.
Yeah.
I mean, our most, to be honest, right? I mean,
No, I
most of our employees make well less than what the Alice says that an employee needs to make to be able to live here in the city. And so even our department heads on average, are still maybe at the upper range of the AMI here in the city, but not to the place. And so for someone to not be able to live in Socrates or in Woodstock or, 10 miles isn't that far currently. And so I think that, that's one of the reasons why we are, trying to clarify this.
Rick? I appreciate what you said, Michael, but at the same time, it's the department heads that are probably harder to recruit. They require more expertise. So there's that conundrum of needing to, spread the search, geographic search. I also think that, nowadays there's 2-income families. So, a lot of times both, if it's a 2-family house, two spouses in a household, they both have, high level jobs and, sometimes they both have to be dedicated to different towns, they might not necessarily. So I don't know, it just seems like it'd be important to have that flexibility.
Michael?
So again, that the exception exists, and I am sympathetic to the argument of, sure, do we really need to have a whole council process to hire a lifeguard that lives in Red Hook? Sure. I don't think that should require a waiver, but do I think that if we have a parks director who doesn't live in the city of Kingston, I do think that should require a waiver. I think that you as a department head should be, frankly, you should live in the city of Kingston, but cognizant of the situations that may happen. That is exactly what the waiver in the code is for, just haven't been followed. I would think that we would all say, yes, we understand that it's hard to find an apartment in Kingston because there's a housing emergency. But, so that's why we would grant you the waiver. But it's not like the off ramp exists. I don't understand why we would need to actually change anything. But again, I would understand it for seasonal employees that are lower on the organizational chart, but department heads, we should be granting the waiver if for some reason they do not live with the city of Kingston.
I think one of the things that I see is that what would the council need to be able to grant one of those waivers from, say, a new department head that was being hired? And I think the code doesn't speak necessarily to that, other than to say that there should be necessary facts and an appropriate resolution to be able to grant that exemption. And so what is a necessary fact that would be needed by this council to be able to kind of allow someone to work here? And that, I think, is what causes the unknown for that person applying, you know, to be a department head level position here in the city, is to understand, well, what would they need from me? What would they want from me? What kind of skill set would I need to prove that I should get a waiver? And I think that that's what's really not clear currently. And I think that that's why, you know, we have some concerns about kind of just taking that approach.
So Bob answered that question. So if there was a search that was done, no qualified applicants lived in the city of Kingston. You, as the executive, said that this is the most qualified employee. They didn't live in the city of Kingston. That to me is enough information to say, okay, grant the waiver to our city engineer who resides wherever they live. I just like, to me, if somebody's becoming a department head, they can wait out that 2-month process. That again, like a lifeguard or maybe a sanitation worker doesn't necessarily need to go through that. But again, this is a department head who's staying till 10 o'clock at night in some instances here. Who we would want to be available during a snowstorm, that should also have their heart attached to Kingston as well as their paycheck. That they should be able to see what our city is like after 5 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, because our city radically changes on the weekends. And having that lived perspective of a city resident is critical. But again, if we have no qualified applicants, which may be the case for some of those technical department heads, but I believe that we are surrounded by immense talent here in the city of Kingston, that we would grant that waiver if and when it was determined that there were no qualified applicants residing in the city.
I'm gonna involve myself now. So I know you mentioned about 30 out of the 150 current employees would need a waiver, and you know. Do you have actual other data to show like how many jobs we listed where we can't get someone or have gone unfilled, right? Like actual data, like more specific data.
Yeah, and I think that when I look at all of our departments currently in their hiring processes, they're hiring the best qualified candidates for the position. And so when the Department of Public Works looks to hire skilled laborers, you know, they're looking for the folks who have the skill sets that they need. And while it is always wonderful if we have Kingston-based, you know, applicants, and they are also in that same level of being able to meet the job requirements, those are great when that happens. But when it doesn't happen, we end up hiring people that live in Sunrise.
Mhm.
And so I don't believe that the departments or civil service track the number of like denials or, you know, how many people applied and from where. But, you know, we do obviously have the addresses of, you know, the people who, you know, would work here. So.
Right. Well, it's not something that we're gonna vote on tonight. So I know I would just like to look into it a little more and just how it reads them from some other communities and how, if there's any differentiation between department heads. So, but I understand the concern, and appreciate it. We always want a well-qualified workforce and to have those jobs filled, those positions filled. Michael?
How many department heads are city residents versus RM?
Yeah, I figured you'd ask. We have. In terms of department heads, or people, that I guess would be. Three. 5. Five out of 24.
Live in the city of Kingston?
No, 5 out of 24 live outside the
Oh, okay.
10-mile range. In terms of actually live in city limits directly.
Twelve of 25 live in the city limits.
Twelve, 25, live in,
24, sorry.
Live within the city limit.
okay, but then you said 5 do not?
5 live outside of, like, we think, the 10-mile range, depending on how you draw it. There's not really clarity on that. Is it Google Maps or is it as the crow flies? So my math here could be a little bit off, but it was based on general.
Okay, but that's only 17.
So the rest are outside
The
the
rest
city
are
limits,
outside the city,
but
but
within the
inside 10.
10 mile.
Okay, so 12,
12 or
12 are outside,
12.
12 are
Over in,
in
5 are outside of the,
10-mile radius.
so the difference between, so 17.
17, 25, 17.
7. Yes. 7 are live within the city limits and 10 miles away. So the net ratio is probably very similar to the rest of the CSEA staff. Generally based on the list.
Are there any openings right now that are causing issues or a hire?
I think that, we continue to recruit for an assistant corporation counsel position, which is technically also in our managing confidential handbook. So while it's not a department head, and there's some on here that are also not department heads, there's some deputies and things like that, so I don't know how you guys feel about that, but they're also included in here to me. So this includes all of the managing confidential employees, not just department heads. So that's, one of the positions where it is unlikely that we will have an assistant corporation counsel working here that lives within this 10-mile radius.
Right. That's it. That's good. Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to look at other communities
Yeah.
and see if they have similar, what kind of rules they have for their employees.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So next up is, adopt the standard workday resolution. So this is, a yearly housekeeping sort of procedure, where if anyone is submitting time to the retirement system, they've tracked their first 3 months of work and Elisa sends it up. So, my understanding is there's just 3 council members that are doing this. So this would just be a resolution, adopting the standard workday.
I don't understand.
So did you opt into the retirement system?
Oh, no,
Okay.
okay.
This is for the people that have opted into the retirement system.
Oh, okay. And what is it then?
It's,
What is the state?
It's shown. So with your permission.
Yes.
So I am a public employee in my 9 to 5. And everybody's welcome to also do it, but it's particularly beneficial to all people who are already in the state retirement system, but which you can track the hours in which you are working as the alderman. And so all it is just simply a spreadsheet of the meetings that you went to.
Oh, I see.
And basically, it's rather broad. I kind of restricted to the physical meetings that I went to, but you could say typing out emails, anything that you're doing in relation to your work as a city council member is applicable time. And so that gets sent up to the state to contribute to your retirement. Not that I think I will ever be able to retire. Society will collapse before then, personally. But in the off sense that capitalism keeps chugging along, I'm sending it to Tom DiNapoli.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll just read the resolution, a resolution adopting the standard workday resolution for 2026. Get a motion? Okay. Second by Rika. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any dissent? Passes 5. Oops. All right, moving on to old business. We're going to now move on to the mighty tree ordinance. Yeah, this is for the mighty.
We'll make sure that update gets put in there.
Do you live in the city?
I do. Yeah. I was wondering if seeing a sort of point forward as a potential example.
I can attest to the fact that you live in the city.
That's right, I'm a constituent of Ward 1, and everything in, the house that my wife and I live in is probably up to code.
It's an old house.
Yeah.
All right, so we have our latest drafts dated March 24th, 2026. We held a public hearing last week. We've got some written public comment as well, which is documented. It's all cataloged on our City of Kingston website and on the agenda for this evening. So wanted to go around and see if there's anything anyone wants to bring forward that was brought forward during, any of the public comment or specific comments that you would like to see any amendments or changes addressed. Yeah. Good, start with Marissa.
We've seen several comments about people concerned about the role of arborists when they're needed, their standard costs. So can you just clarify in what scenarios is an arborist needed for a tree decision? And then what are the typical costs of a certified arborist?
Yes, I can help add some clarity to that. So, when the ordinance would require, say like review by an arborist, as an example, it shows up in either permitting process for the removal of a protected tree as that category in the ordinance, right? The term protected tree. For the purposes of, say, determining the condition of the trees. So that would be in instances where the property owner is wanting to remove a tree that would be, healthy,
native species within the size categories, that sort of thing. As far as, to provide the information of that, condition rating, in order to determine what the potential value of the tree is. So, in the like chain of events, it's property owner wants to remove a tree on private property that's designated protected tree. They have gotten authorization to do so through the permitting process. And now they are going to replace the value of that tree that is being removed. So that could be either through the planting of new trees or through the paying of the financial value of the tree. So in calculating that condition to determine value, that's probably the biggest instance where a certified arborist would be used for the ordinance. Off the top of my head, and we could double check it within the writing too. I think when it comes to instances of property owners wanting to remove trees because they're dead, they're diseased, they're hazardous, those are kind of like a case by case basis in the permit review process. The expense of hiring a certified arborist wouldn't be necessary for like a obviously dead tree. In determining like the state of the tree being posing risk or being hazardous, legally, I think that's where a arborist review would be important to have. Although I don't think the ordinance has, the ordinance has like over general language around arborist reviews being needed. It doesn't specifically call out every instance of different tree situations for it. And I'll pause there because I think that might be answering your question.
Can I ask a follow-up, Shannon? So taking it back, in the instances of a disease or hazardous tree,
Yes.
in lieu of the expense of hiring an arborist, can the urban forester make that determination on the owner's behalf?
Generally, yes.
So
Yeah.
they don't have to go to the arborist, or they can just say, can you come look at the tree, and you say, yeah, it's diseased.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so it's not, an arborist is not called for in every situation.
Yeah, it may be beneficial to the property owner to hire a third party certified arborist if the property owner decides that they are not in agreement with what my observations of the tree is.
Okay, and then, that's good. And then the other question is, so if a property owner wants to remove a protected tree,
Mhm.
in addition to the fee or the replacement value fee,
Mhm.
or getting their own tree,
Yes, yeah.
they also have to hire a certified arborist to determine that value.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Michael,
So the money collected,
Yes.
where does that go?
So the money that would be collected for replacement tree values goes into a account that would be made by passing this ordinance or adopting into law, I mean, of a account that would be labeled, I have the ordinance in front of me, but kind of like the layman's term, a tree bank, basically. So that account then outlines that the monies that are going into that account can only be used for tree work in the city of Kingston.
So that account will generate interest?
That is something that I think is a very good question to bring up with, say like Don Tui, for example, of how the city would want that account to be done.
So if somebody has a hardship and they can't afford to take the tree down, can they apply for the city to cover that cost from the fund?
That is part of my intent of having the tree bank account is, that will be monies going towards tree work. I would love to see the city utilize this tree bank as a resource to help community members as well for when there's a financial hardship involved. With also as we continue talking about this, in the instances in which we've talked about at different points in the past too, the property owner wants to remove a healthy tree, that doesn't have the, financial ability to, pay the full value of the tree, and then would go to an appeal process that we've talked about. That would be, I'm only saying this to say that would be separate from what you're talking about here.
So how is, sorry, it's still,
That's okay.
so how is that hardship determined?
I think that would be formulating a program, basically, for that sort of, you might want to call like a reimbursement program. I think that would be something that would be formulated at a bigger like city project scale, not so much like a program that's formulated within the ordinance itself.
Okay, I do have more questions.
All right, does anybody, let me give someone.
I got to finish off.
So does this apply to city property?
Which part?
The entire thing? So say we want to, say the Parks Department wants to build a new trail through the 87 acres. That would require a pretty substantial removal of trees.
Got it. I see.
Is the city, one, required to pay the cost into the fund? And two, is the city required to plant the tree value?
City is not required to pay into the tree fund, that would be the city paying itself, so to avoid that. And then as far as replacement trees, let me make sure that I say exactly what is written in the ordinance now, because we do outline requirements of the city. But I've had seen some other heads shaking no, and people maybe have this more off the top.
But my understanding is the city never even had to go through the tree commission if they're about to remove trees or, yeah.
The current code does make that requirement not explicitly of the city, but the language says that all trees on public property require authorization for removal through the tree commission. Then it's kind of up to interpretation of, does that thing get applied to the city? With me coming along, it has been applying, with our, department's work for whatever purposes trees might be removed. And for the most part, it's been a welcome addition, even though it is one extra step, but I've been able to provide a lot more clarity around that. Maybe I could pull up exactly what you're looking for real quick, Michael, well.
Ruth's gonna.
Yeah, just related to that, could the city, if we don't already have it, create a tree nursery so that, trees that the city removes that are valuable trees could, just be planted in the nursery for use in other places, when the time comes?
Yeah, so that is something that other municipalities have done as well. A big question is, where do we dedicate the room for that? That seems to be a really hard thing for city property, like our parks and that sort of thing, is to designate. And granted, nurseries don't have to be huge, it doesn't have to be 100-acre tree nursery or anything like that. But similarly, like, our parks department, our DPW, all struggle to have enough space for just their general workings. So it's an interesting question of like, is that something that could exist? But I haven't put it into this ordinance for the intent of the purposes of like retaining our mature tree canopy.
So Michael.
So
I'm just gonna go down.
part of that leads into my next question of, the city exempt from its own statutes. So so it seems like we would still ask permission of the tree commission if we were to build a trail. But the ordinance doesn't actually amend who appoints the tree commission. So right now it's entirely appointed by the mayor.
No, it's actually, right now, it says city of Kingston because it's an open question.
So
It's not determined in this draft.
I do think it should be determined that we appoint the tree commission, frankly, because I think if we don't, then the mayor a future mayor who wants a trail could just get rid of the commission members who don't approve of cutting down those trees and put on cronies.
That makes sense. I'm gonna make a note of that one, for council approval of tree commission members.
I think that's a no-brainer.
It was open to everybody.
And, yeah,
I
I have
related that, I know, yeah.
So, and I could be wrong, but we had had a discussion about, the fact that your position is grant funded
Mhm.
and that there's a, you know, an end date. And so I'm trying to think if we incorporated that language such that we would not be referring to an urban forester necessarily.
Mhm.
Was that accomplished?
So this question did come up.
Yeah.
And
At the end.
I think it's on page five, it's on page 5.
Okay.
Because that was a question that.
I mean, it is.
Right, because one of the things that I found was like a comparably sized city of Beacon, they don't have an urban forester. They just use their tree commission to make these determinations. And on their tree commission, they are also allowed to hire arborists or, what do they call this, two of them, arborist and,
Forester?
no.
No.
The counterpart to an arborist is a horticulturalist.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, what we would do was that incorporated in your absence?
Yeah, yeah.
Absent of urban forestry.
Yes, so this came up at different points. The current draft, what we have to address what you're speaking about. One is under definition for what urban forester is throughout this ordinance. And that's on page 4 of the current draft. That definition is city staff member responsible for the management of trees that comprise the city of Kingston's urban forest.
City staff member.
Yes.
Not the commission.
That's right. Now, separate from that definition, I do think offers some latitude in a situation that personally I don't, but where a city staff member who may not necessarily be in the city position of urban forester,
Right.
say like, I'm gone for whatever reason. And now there's the question of who is keeping this work going, and also the question of who was doing this work before I got here too. So we did have a couple of different city staff members involved with being basically the city representative to talk about tree conditions when permit reviews happen with the
Right.
tree commission. So it's in a way, the definition for urban forester retains that ability that the city was using before I got hired in the situation that my position is no longer here too. Secondary to that, when it comes to the tree commission, there's also then language that one of the commission members, I'm pulling it up here. Oh, I think it's on either page 5 or page 6. And if anyone else finds it before me, feel free to jump in, but.
And what are you looking for then?
I believe there's a section that is carried over from the current city code that at least one of the tree commission members, shall be something like an arborist or,
Right,
yeah,
I think I did see that.
Right.
yeah. And actually the hardest time to find it is when I'm sitting in front of you, but. So effectively, just, to have some backups, basically, for if my position were to not exist. One of them is that the definition for the term urban forester under this code does allow for other city staff members to fill that.
It's page 4,
Page 4, thank you.
Oh, that's good.
section 5, paragraph A.
Yeah, so, with at least one being either professionally trained or experienced in the field of municipal arboriculture, or one being then a separate thing related to the memorial tree fund. That's not related to your question.
Okay.
But does that
No, that does.
But that doesn't, so yes, sorry. Just to continue on to that, right? The tree commission doesn't review all trees.
That is correct, yeah, that was a distinction to make too.
What is under the purview of the tree commission?
Yes, so tree commission, as it is a body that's made of community members who are not city staff, will continue their current review of permits related to removal of trees on public or otherwise city-owned property. Their review would not be for trees that are now protected under this ordinance on private property. The review of those permits, given a couple of factors, one being how would we even want to handle community members who are volunteering their time being the ones who decide these permits on private property? Another one being the potential load of permits for a body that meets 1 hour per month. To simplify that and have it be the city staff member, in this case, the urban forester, be the one who does the permit reviews, similar to how our like buildings and safety does permit reviews as city staff members as well.
This side of the table.
Oh, sorry, mine is sort of is actually a follow-up to Terrell's, and I'm thinking on page 5, it does say the city of Kingston's planning department shall employ a staff member. I'm thinking that might be more designate a staff member, because the word employ means paying for someone, whereas every commission designates a staff person to be a liaison, and essentially that's what it's saying here, the agent and program administrator. So that to me would help clarify some of that.
So are you saying you want that word changed?
Change from employ to
I
designate.
agree, yeah.
Okay. So that was my first question. Then I have one more, and this was brought to me by a constituent. And this is on page 12. It talks about pruning of trees within the public right of way. Now, does that include, it says that shall be performed by a technician or a tree service contracted by the city of Kingston? Some of my constituents, does the public right of way include the easements that go onto private property or no? Because that's come up where some of my constituents have had a tree that needs to come down, or needs pruning, not coming down, it needs pruning, and it's in the easement, and they have had to get the permits and pay to do it. And so I think this could be a little confusing, just in terms of who is responsible for it. So what is the public right of way? By definition, what is that?
So when you say easement, do you mean the part of the frontage of the property that
The first, that's right, the trees that are all being planted in people, that have been planted in people's private property.
In like the
It's an
areas
easement
where
that they don't, right,
not delineated by a sidewalk, for
Correct.
example? Yeah,
correct,
okay.
because in my ward, there are no there are almost no sidewalks.
We're working on it.
I know, but that's 5 years from now, but, or whatever, where there aren't sidewalks and it's in somebody's front yard.
Yeah,
They take care of it, but if the city so that's their question, and that's come up a few times, so I just wondered.
yes. Okay, so to answer your question, and I want to make sure I'm looking at the same part that you are too. So you said on page 12?
Here, I can just, I made a note, yes, it's right there, I just made a note, because my constituent down the street asked.
So this last part here,
Yes,
this one?
yes,
Okay, so just for everyone else's sake here, the part that Sarah's referring to is, let's see, so that would be
DFD.
DF, the second paragraph.
yeah, second paragraph of DF, which I think is on page 13. Does that look right for everyone else?
12.
12, okay, sorry about that. But anyway, so this part reads, pruning of trees within the public right of way and on city-owned property shall be performed as deemed necessary, the mandatory blah, 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 by a forestry technician employed by or a tree service contracted by the city of Kingston. And then some details on the standards portion. So what that is saying is that, the shall be performed as deemed necessary is to reflect how the city already is involved with pruning of trees in the public right of way in its current state, which is say like our DPW is pruning low hanging limbs for street clearance. That's the thing. It's not creating a requirement for property owners that those trees can only be pruned by the city. It's saying that when the city deems it necessary to do that pruning work for city purposes, such as, like street clearance and that sort of thing, that work can be done by either city staff, or by a contractor contracted by the city. It's not a requirement on the property owners. It's just saying, these are things that the city normally does, and this is now explicitly outlined.
But it's only when the city determines it. In other words, if the property owner is saying there's a limb that's hanging down and, it's hanging over some cars, so can they call the city and say, come and look at this? And then what if the city says, well, it's not so dangerous, it's like,
Yeah.
I could see
Conflict there?
conflict happening.
Absolutely,
Yes.
So two parts I'll go over there. The first one is, it uses the term in the right of way area, and that's to not create different distinctions between when there's a sidewalk and when there's not.
Right,
The right of way is just the right of way, for whatever, the street has a 60-foot right of way or a 40-foot right of way. That applies regardless of there being a sidewalk or not. So,
Right.
and another way of describing that is the easement off the pavement edge into the front of the property.
right.
But most standard language I've seen around this is just referred to it as the right of way.
Right.
So anyway, that part aside, so that way we're all using the same terms together.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I want people to call and say when they're concerned about branches hanging overhead. They already do. They use our 311 app
Yeah.
for that, and 311 website as well. Basically, like a concerned citizen is like, there's a dead branch hanging over the street. I put in a 311 request, and then our DPW does go out and remove those branches, specifically for the purpose of removing that potential risk or hazard from the public street, sidewalk, right of way.
Right.
Yeah.
But then it also says necessary to manage tree health. And so in other words, will the city, if a resident were to say, not that there's any kind of public safety risk, but this tree is looking sort of unhealthy, will the city then come and prune it if someone like yourself as an urban forester says, oh, this tree is getting a little unhealthy. They're just concerned about what are my financial obligations related to a tree in the easement that's the city planted that, I didn't plant and.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think two things that are going on there to mention is that, like, as the city deems necessary for tree health, really kind of goes into what the city's capacity to do this work is too.
Well,
Yeah.
right,
So
so,
that's kind of the question of, do we want this ordinance to also define what the city's capacity is? Right now, this language is written in a way to say, like, the city has the ability to do this as, deemed necessary. Part of that necessity is, does the city have capacity to do so? Yeah. Does that?
sorry, but I guess the city didn't have.
We even define right away the ordinance is what I'm getting.
But it's also just the capacity of like who, that's what they're concerned about is if the city doesn't have the capacity to really deal with pruning the tree, then does that fall back on the property owner?
In the definition.
And you're right, that would be a good thing to have.
So we should have.
Right, away is missing from the definition? Okay, then yes, that's a good one, Pat. So it sounds like, Sarah, what you would like is to make sure that we're using clear
Clear
language
language.
to clarify what the responsibilities of the property owner is with trees and branches.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it. That's exactly it. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got two questions. Has Ed Norman read this?
I don't have the ability to answer your question. Yeah.
I would suggest that we want to review what public works.
Mhm.
Of these ordinances, and I'd be interested in their comments. The second thing that I heard at the public hearing primarily was people's concerns about regulating trees on private property.
Yes, that's the big thing.
And, which is a problem. It's a problem for many of the people that spoke, but it's also a problem to me. How do we,
To make sure I'm understanding the right structure, at the public hearings, when you're talking about this?
Right.
Okay.
and written comments, and, people are concerned that regulation of, the tree in my backyard,
Mhm.
And that's a concern of mine, how do we, and to find people and to, in essence, for costing making them pay money for a tree in their backyard. That's a problem. I don't know how to get around it, but it's certainly something we can't, I don't believe we can ignore it. I think we have to address it some way, and I really don't know how that will occur, how we do that.
Yeah,
I don't expect it is, I'm just, that's a concern that I heard that worries me.
Ruth? Yeah, I had that same concern, but also I was thinking, you know, we have zoning for buildings and building safety. Why not zoning for trees and horticulture, which does, I mean, to a certain extent,
But it doesn't cost you. In the zoning, you have to conform to the zoning ordinance, that's fine. You don't get a fine if you don't. I mean, you get a sign work or you know.
Sometimes you get.
Sometimes you get-
Sometimes you get.
Sometimes you can
It
get
really doesn't go far, you get fined.
Yeah.
but wouldn't the zoning also, for, say like buildings, for example, zoning for buildings also create certain, like, financial realms that a builder is operating with in the first place?
Right, there's significant case law around zoning.
Yes,
You know, I mean, it's really very complicated stuff. And in fact, our zoning is not traditional zoning, you know, Euclidean zoning is different, you know, it's a whole mess of stuff. Which I'm really not prepared to talk about. But it's something we should think about. I mean, it's, you know, we're regulating people's property. You know, and with a fine, which is an interesting problem. I don't know the answer to that. I'd be interested to know what Matt has to say about that,
Mhm.
for one thing. I just thought it needs to be out there.
I haven't spoken at all.
Yeah,
I want to respond to that. Yeah, I have a lot of those same concerns. I think from what I'm understanding from people, and also my same concern is not so much as when you're doing a permitting process through the planning board and it's like a new construction, and yes, that is technically private property, but it is part of the build out of the property, and that's but you know, there are definitely concerns about overreach on the private property, it not being part of the tree commission, which then makes it all the more confusing and onerous. And then if you're denied a permit, having to go pay a fee to go argue in front of the DBA. So,
Yeah,
so I'm also would like to get opinion back from Corporation Council on that and our ability to withstand
Right.
possible litigation. So, okay, I'm gonna go back.
That wasn't done.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So what you just said before about, you know, the city, being available with the if the capacity is there, the city being available to do pruning, on trees that are leaning over into public space. So that's talking about the branches, but what about the roots and the sidewalks? So I would think that if the city would cover the cost of pruning that affects the public right of way, the city would also pay for potential tree removal or, you know, fixing the sidewalk issues where the sidewalk is buckled from the roots. So the way I understood it previously was that a homeowner would be responsible for that, but I feel like what you just said places the responsibility potentially on the city, which would be good because a lot of homeowners can't afford that. It's a huge expense, not both removing the tree and fixing the sidewalk. So I guess I just was wondering about clarity and.
yeah, I could speak to that too. Currently our code has a lot of language when it comes to sidewalks, and property owner, abutting property owner responsibility for those. it would definitely be interesting to look at including management of sidewalks in a tree ordinance. The health of trees, basically, like when we reach a conflict between like sidewalk upheaval and tree roots and that sort of thing, that normally is not connected to like the health or structural safety of trees in the right of way. If anything, it's the opposite. The trees are buckling the sidewalks. One, because the appropriate materials underneath the sidewalks were never installed to allow tree roots to grow in the first place. But those trees have survived, they're now healthy, and by sending their roots further outwards, they're actually more structurally secure. But it does create like a interesting thing to basically consider of like, do we want to continue, and this, I think it's a bigger question in the ordinance of continue revisiting the idea of what sidewalk management and repair and that sort of thing looks like as far as responsibilities between property owners and the city. My recommendation would be to keep that separate from the ordinance because this is something that already has so many gears turning for the city in the first place, with separate discussions from anything tree related happening. That would probably be my main recommendation is to keep the ordinance focused on tree related factors with outside. So right now the city code has two chapters related to trees, 373 and 374. Outside of those two chapters, there is a section in the sidewalks chapter that specifically calls out tree roots causing sidewalk issues, and that repair of those sidewalks when buckled by tree roots already requires review by the tree commission for that. So we already do have that in our code as a requirement. So there's some additional context.
Just by way of, there's 81 miles of sidewalk in the city.
Yes.
The biggest mode of failure is tree roots, is trees.
Yep.
So you end up in a situation where the dilemma is, I have a perfectly healthy tree in front of my house. My sidewalk is failing as a result. My insurance company is saying you have to fix it. Do I have to pay a fine and a fee to take that tree down to fix my sidewalk? And that's the dilemma, and
Yeah, I'd actually, if it's okay,
Yeah.
like to offer a third way,
Okay.
which is what I'm kind of already doing now in the first place, which is sidewalks can be retrofitted to retain street trees as well. That's the number one thing that I work with property owners on when they have sidewalk and tree root conflicts.
So who absorbs that cost?
But right now, as with all costs for anything sidewalk or public right of way related, property owner does. Yeah. This ordinance does not change that from what the current status is. And that's what I'm saying when I'm saying maybe it's a bigger conversation beyond just trees when we're talking about sidewalks.
Are you done? Sorry, are you not?
Like, for now, yeah.
So I agree with Bob that I think that there's way too much stick and not enough carrot in the ordinance. Particularly the cost associated with taking a tree down. Most of the single family homeowners left in my ward are seniors on fixed incomes who can barely afford to pay the landscaper to rake the trees if they can no longer do it themselves. So to ask them to pay a rather high amount of money to both take the tree down if they're not physically capable of doing it themselves, and two, now pay an additional several $1,000s to do this. It's just not possible for so many people. And I can appreciate that eventually there could be a hardship portion of it to assist with that, but it just still feels like it's really taxing on homeowners. And at the same time, we're trying to build more density specifically in that part of my ward in Midtown by encouraging the development of ADUs. But if you are already going to try and spend $250,000 to build an ADU, you're adding, $25,000 more dollars to that cost to take down a couple of trees to meet the other goal of the city that we're trying to do. And it just feels like this, I mean, it's this natural conflict of both preservation and development, but it just feels a little too, it doesn't seem like there are hardly any incentives to a property owner for this. It's only if you take a tree down, we're coming for you in a really big way. And then my second point is right of way is defined in the code already.
Trying to code with nothing there. Okay.
And, but I would prefer that no definitions in the ordinance differ all that much from the definitions already in place in our zoning code. Because that just leads to confusing interpretations. So I would hope that council, or city staff make sure that our definitions align between existing zoning code and this ordinance.
Pretty much what he said. I think this is like, and also what Bob has said, I think it's intrusive, in terms of the requirements the financial requirements that are now being asked of the property owner. It seems like, we just, well, okay, this is, that Tom Hoffett had sent.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he makes some excellent points.
Mhm.
And I also have to say that, I agree, the city of Kingston has been a tree, what is it called? The tree city.
Yeah.
For years. One of the first ones, in fact, which goes to that our reverence for trees. And so to now have this come in and sort of, look at us as though we don't know how to care for our trees feels insulting, intrusive. And we're going into private property, and I don't feel comfortable with it.
I've been sort of thinking over the last few weeks, what my main concern about trees being cut down is the clear cutting that I've seen when developers come in and they clear cut private property. And I'm wondering if there's some quantity of tree, if somebody takes down one tree to put in an ADU, is that a problem? But if someone's taking down more than, say, 3 trees on a property or 4, maybe would that trigger something that would trigger fees and fines and other things that, or somehow bring it to the planning board or to the tree commission to prevent that kind of desecration of the forest, the little tiny neighborhood forest that we have, because that did happen in Ward 1.
Yeah.
And I realized it was the quantity, of trees. If one tree on somebody's property was taken down, that's one thing, but maybe that's another way to think about how, the stick, versus the carrot, make it stick higher for people who are taking down multiple trees on a property.
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing that out there.
Of course, yeah. I could speak to some of these things if council's interested.
Sure.
Yeah. First thing is that I think it's a really good sign that we have so much community feedback happening in the first place. And I haven't gotten to see all of the emails that have come in, but I've heard rumors.
You probably know a lot of what you see.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of what is being expressed as like fear, concern, worry. And I know a lot of what's being expressed around connection and understanding of the intent behind this too. The couple of things I want to check in with, the first one being about like, is there a way that we could craft language to focus on larger scale clear cutting that then alleviates potential regulations for smaller instances? A lot of communities have tried to do that and they have all been legally challenged and lost. And I'm speaking very like generally in doing that. And if anyone wants more detailed information, I'm happy to provide it. Tree law is equally as like dense and storied as any other kind of land regulation for housing and that sort of thing. The way that this ordinance is currently done takes the stance of no specific regulations for any kind of individual in a way where it could be construed as putting a bias of regulations on any sort of instance, whether that being like land type, zoning, ownership, corporate, residential, et cetera. Yeah.
Quantity.
What's that?
What about quantity?
And it's same for quantity too, because the challenge that comes up legally there is, on what grounds did you decide the quantity? Like, what was the basis behind saying like, okay, we will allow 3 trees to be removed per property under 5,000 square feet? The legal challenge to that was what logic, expertise, technical information was decided to do that. And in that challenge, it usually crumbled apart because it came down to, we kind of just set a number that felt right. And then that then turned into construe of why would a regulation allow for people doing some actions, but not for another action. So being very, very careful and considerate of that has been the direction this ordinance has gone. And I'd like us to continue that direction moving forward as we refine it too. Making sure that how this ends up like is definitely in the like goal of being fair in meeting community needs, but doesn't open us up for a situation where the positive intent of doing this ordinance basically gets torpedoed under like, legal technicalities. But there's still opportunities to continue revising. I'm not saying that to say like we can't consider things, but just to be mindful.
Would you say that an option of saying not doing the backyard private property, but only do permits for new construction would put us into that realm of?
I suspect it might, because we have properties where the building frontage is right to the edge of the right of way, and we have properties where the buildings are set back too.
Because I mean, there's other municipalities that have.
New Paltz, for example,
Yeah.
is the 40 feet in from pavement edge. And I don't know if they've gotten a legal challenge on that or not. I don't know what their enforcement looks like in the first place. But my goal would be to, while it's really good to know what the other communities are doing, to then not just go, oh, they're getting away with this, then we can get away with it too. But to make sure that what we end up doing passes muster personally. No shade on any other.
Right.
But yeah.
So I would like to ask everybody here on the committee to put your questions, send your questions that you would want to ask Corporation Counsel to me, and I will forward them all.
Okay.
Maybe by Monday.
And even though I'm not on the committee, kind of.
Yes, you're here. Yeah. So by Monday, just so that we have the weekend to work on it.
I think that's a good idea. 2 other little things that I wanted to touch on also. One is, Terrell, to actually go back to what you were mentioning with us being a Tree City USA and this being our 30th year. In order for us to qualify as a Tree City each year, we have to submit what we're doing in order to do that. It's a points-based system. This is our 2nd year in a row of not just being designated Tree City USA, but also getting a growth award for our additional tree achievements that we've been able to do. One of the biggest single point values that we can get is by establishing, and this is through the Arbor Day Foundation, a tree ordinance that has protection for trees on private property.
Hmm.
Yeah, so if our growth award, generally we need, I think it's 15 total points. A lot of the things that we did in this past year, including, like the large land purchase that we did over by Wilbur. That 80 acres got us a couple of points towards the 15, and we really stacked everything we did. I believe if we were to pass an ordinance that had private property tree regulations, we would get 10 points out of the 15.
But we already are at platinum, we're at the highest level, aren't we?
There's only one level for Tree City status, and then in addition to that, you can get a growth award.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, I'm confusing with another one.
it's only 5.
So, so we've done well without this being in place.
How does that benefit a homeowner though?
I was
It's
gonna say,
gonna have to
that's-
comply.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was just to mention what,
Right.
you were talking about with the Tree City thing, but that is a good question of, our Tree City status is just basically like ceremonial, at the end of the day. Like, there are ways that our Tree City USA status does help us when we apply to various grants related to urban forestry stuff. Us continuing to get growth awards each year will also help with that as well, but it is minor compared to other things we were doing.
I just mentioned it as more of an indication of the caretaking that
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kingston residents
Yeah.
already.
I wanted to provide like a yes and for you. And the last part is another example of a Tree City USA that I'd like to just bring for everyone's attention is Portland, Oregon. They have had private tree regulations for 10 years plus at this point. Originally, their regulations were extremely strict, did not allow for tree values to be paid out. They required trees to be retained no matter what. Portland is a city of 2.5 million people. It's big compared to us for sure. And they have been extremely focused on meeting their own housing crisis in that city as well. Portland's one of the, main cities for like the advancement of ADU laws, basically. Portland, housing stock wise was very similar to Kingston up until about, let's say 8 years ago as well. Granted, it's been a while since I've gotten to visit there, but I bring this all up to say that Portland's current tree preservation laws are even still stricter than what the one in our current draft is, where they don't make many exemptions for different types of trees, for invasive, that sort of thing. They still have like values for hazardous trees that need to be replaced as well. Additionally, granted, it's for a city of 2.5 million people, but they built, they had for 2025, 31 low-income housing projects completed, given the size of their city. And they were able to do that while having a tree preservation ordinance that regulates trees on private property that is stricter than what this proposed one is as well. So while it's really important that we continue looking at this and finding the balance that makes the most sense for Kingston, the precedence is out there. And other cities are finding that conflict that was spoken about so much tonight around preservation, housing, livable outdoor environments with all these increasing stressors that we have in our daily reality. Other cities are finding ways to get all of it done simultaneously. And I think we're moving in the direction of being able to do the same.
Right. Do you know how Portland, Oregon, helps, low and moderate income families, afford this? No expenses?
Like which expenses? Like the tree work?
Yeah,
Taking out trees, replacing.
Whenever.
Yeah,
whenever they're
that's a
trying
good
to
question.
break-
Off the top of my head, I don't have.
That would be
one.
good to, that
Yeah,
would be good to know,
yeah.
because, if we're trying to emulate some of that, also emulating the affordability stuff.
Like, do they have a tree bank?
Yes, they do.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, so their payouts for trees that have been removed and not replaced go into a tree bank as well. because, yeah, the question comes up, and just because I can't help myself, of like, we have a lot of low income, homeowners, property owners here in Kingston. And we don't want to place undue burdens on them, when they need to remove trees. What I'm asking is that we continue thinking about what the need looks like, as opposed to the strategy of always, saying that trees need to come down. The point of this ordinance is to think about how we could retain trees while meeting our other needs as well. One strategy, and Michael, you spoke to this, of carrot versus stick, is to recognize the value financially of those trees being removed. For people to consider, like, am I willing to do this knowing what the value of the tree is, not just financially to myself as a property owner, but financially to the community that I'm a part of.
All right, so I think we've all gone over everything. It's getting late. I know you'd love to share your knowledge and we appreciate that.
Thank you, and I appreciate your efforts to constituents. You really do a great job.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. All right, so it is 8:39. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
I just wanted to hear.
Thank you.